What's up, everybody? Welcome back or welcome to the channel. As always, I'm Hector the Pepper, and today is going to be a very special video. It is the first interview podcast type video that we're doing on this channel, and I am happy to say that I'm able to do it with one of my very good friends, Connor.
Hello.
And Connor and I kind of met through work-related activities. So we're just gonna kick it off because we really have no direction. I mean, that's the biggest thing about this channel, honestly, is there's really no like niche. Like everybody always talks about a niche. Like we kind of just film what we want here, you know. If you guys have obviously checked out some of the other content, we have cooking videos, conspiracy videos, serial killer videos. And now we have a interview podcast video. So I think this will be a interesting addition to the no niche content. All right. So like I said, Connor. All right. Welcome. How long have we known each other?
I want to say towards last November is when we started. I kind of made my interactions with him because he would always be at the armory, and so we'd be downloading. I just start asking him little questions because I noticed that he had been in for a little bit. So I just, hey, how's it going? Just like that little small talk conversation kind of just built into something big when you actually came to section.
So, fun fact, we've never discussed it on this channel before. I am in the Navy. But that's here nor there. Again, I'm just going to put this little staple in there. None of the opinions or things discussed are a direct affiliation with DoD. All right. So, we love the DoD. We love the Navy. We love the military. We love America. All right. That's the biggest takeaway that you need to take from this interaction. All right. So if anything is said that seems kind of borderline iffy, trust me, it's just dark humor. And that's how we in the military get by.
With a lot of
yeah,
things,
we get by, So if it's people over here like, oh, well, I'm going to off myself. Well, please don't, but that's funny, So, you got to cry, you got to laugh so you don't cry kind of thing. All right. So first of all, Connor, where'd you grow up?
So I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. I grew up in a small town called Fluvanna County, home of the Flucos. Near Palmyra, Virginia. It's kind of like an old historic area. Born in 2000 in Charlottesville. Grew up there. Went through the elementary school, middle school, high school, and everything. Close to Richmond, Virginia. We're like 40 minutes away. Charlottesville is home of UVA, so that's like the big staple. Everybody knows where UVA is because like sports and whatnot. And then obviously protests that happened a couple years ago. I don't affiliate with that part. And then just grew up around that area and then moved all over the place.
So you weren't at that protest?
No, I was working that day.
Oh, yeah. If you weren't working, would you have been there?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay. Absolutely not. Yeah. Okay. All right. So so you grew up. So I know a little bit, obviously, about you. So you played quite a bit of sports growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider swimming a sport?
I think it is. It's in the Olympics.
Would you describe that to somebody as like, I play swimming?
No, I would say you don't play wrestling. So I did wrestling too and stuff. You play tennis and basketball, football, but you compete for wrestling or swimming or cheerleading. It's still competition based stuff. It's either an individual sport or you're doing a relay for swimming where you're working with 3 other people for a total of 4.
Do you were you good?
I was decent. I was good enough to swim in college with my friends and everything. So I wasn't as fast as them, but I was able to keep up with them, I guess.
Like all the sports that you've done, have you met anybody of notoriety that the average person might have heard of that have made it kind of far?
Lacrosse is probably a big one. I know that not many people that I've met have gone to play pro, but we've all played together in that same I either played against them or we grew up in the same area where they're playing pro league now. But a lot of UVA players would come out and coach and everything. One of my high school coaches is a UVA coach right now, and they won 2 back-to-back national championships. So I think that's a pretty big deal. One of my coaches growing up, he's a specific goalie coach, and his son played for the Slovakia team during one of the World Championship games for lacrosse. He was just like, hey, I'm in the area, and they needed a goalie, so he was able to play with him. So I think that's a pretty big deal.
Dude, lacrosse. I mean, I know you play lacrosse. You play goalie, right?
Yeah.
They don't They don't make a lot of money in like the pros, right?
When it comes to like the professional leagues and everything, you could compare it to like WNBA and then lacrosse. Like they're not out there like on the main ESPN channels, but they're still getting paid to play. A lot of like the minor league lacrosse or major league lacrosse and then national lacrosse leagues, it's normal guys working 9 to 5 and females too. Like they're just working, and then in the summer they have their travel teams that they go play for, like as if it was a high school team. They're just getting paid to do it a little bit.
Okay. So it's pretty much just like love of the game.
Yeah, like you're just playing to play, and then you get a little bit of money for it too. But the Premier League, which Paul Rabel and his brother created recently, they try to have more. What's it called? You get more equity with it, so you can get the health care. You can buy into the team. You can pretty much be a full time lacrosse player with that league now.
What do you think it's going to take to get like lacrosse in the lacrosse, because I know that that's one of the main sports that you were passionate about.
Mhm.
Like what do you think it's going to take to get lacrosse like in the mainstream?
I think it's going to be in the next Summer Olympics. So the way that it was before, they had the World Championship games. That was every 4 years, and every team for the nations would come and they would pick a location and they would do a tournament style play championship. And so like if you were the best, which is normally Britain, Canada, and U.S., like they're always the ones that are like the top three. They would play, and then but you have teams from like Uganda was a big team. Japan has gotten pretty big recently. Like baseball is a big sport for them now, but lacrosse is getting up there. And so if you were from Canada, you could play for the Canadian team, but you're normally playing for like the U.S. team. You could go back and forth if you wanted to. And I think with the Premier League, they're doing a lot more showcase style events where they're going city to city, like these major cities. So they'll play, do it's more fast paced and everything, but they're doing a lot more shows and whatnot. So I think that's bringing it a lot together.
Well, I mean, you heard it here first. Summer Olympics. They're gonna be playing. Check it out. I mean, I don't know much about lacrosse. Are you allowed to fight? Because it's kind of like
Yeah.
hockey.
So when it comes to the National Lacrosse League, that's more indoor style play. It's on a hockey rink, but it's a turf field. You don't have the long sticks like you do in a normal game. The goalies kind of wear the same amount of padding as the goalies for hockey, and then the padding for the midfielders and attack, like almost the same style as hockey. But the refs won't stop the fight unless somebody hits the ground, just like in hockey. And so they started to implement that a little bit more for the Premier League, which is outside on kind of the same field as like a normal lacrosse game, but they have it to where if you score in a normal game, you face off. There's always a face off after a goal. But in the Premier League, they have it more fast paced, like in the NLL, where if you score, goalie clears it. That's a continuation of the game. You don't have to face off every time. And then when it comes to the fights, you're not stopping the fight unless somebody hits the deck. So I think
Huh.
they're trying to implement it to be more like not scrappy, but they promote that because it gets the crowd going. I think.
Do you think they should start kind of like have you heard of the Banana League, baseball Banana
Yeah.
League? Do you think I mean I don't know if it kind of makes the sport of baseball like a little bit of a mockery, but do you think they would maybe get a little bit more rubber on the road if they started kind of doing that, making it like more fun?
I think they could try to do that to like get the crowd going a little bit more, have them be more interactive. I guess maybe do that for like maybe a halftime show. They could do something fun like that, but then it just goes right back into the rest of the game. I think that'd be kind of interesting to see.
So I know you were good enough at lacrosse in high school that I mean, this might be a shocker, because you don't really hear much about it in the military. But Connor here went to a liberal school, liberal arts school, but on a academic scholarship, but kind of hand in hand to play lacrosse,
Mhm.
right? So how did that work out for you?
So senior year, I started looking for colleges and everything. Randolph College was one of my go-to looks because my sister had went to Lynchburg University, which was originally Lynchburg College, but they moved up to the next level, I guess, and now they have university in their title. And Randolph College was one of the schools that my sister was looking at, and so I was like, all right, yeah, I'll take a look at that. Reached out, submitted the application and everything, and then the coach would reach out, and so I got to meet them, did a little showcase with them. Um, Lynchburg College is where I wanted to go originally because my
Mhm.
sister was going there, and their team is one of the best teams for Division 3, and the coaches were there for the showcase. So my best friend Sean and I went. They were like, "Hey, how you doing? We're doing the excuse me, we're doing the same thing. A couple of months from now, why don't you go out there and do the same? So did that, met with the coach. I like the school. It was a small campus. I'm a very like when it comes to the classes, I like having the small classes because then I feel more involved to like learn and like engaged and whatnot.
Right.
And then graduated, went there 2018. Um, lacrosse was fun with them. I thought it was cool that I was going to play a college sport and everything. But when it came down to like the team and everything, it was a bunch of good dudes. It just I played lacrosse my whole life and it started to not be fun anymore. So that's when I was just like, all right, maybe I'll just do swimming in the winter so I can keep myself in shape and everything. The swim coach was like, all right, yeah, you can walk on. We'll see how you do. And then so winter came around, I swam for them, walked onto that, and then conference came around in the springtime, and that's when lacrosse season was actually starting. And so I didn't get to go to the swim conference that's like the big competition and everything for the end of the season because I had lacrosse going on. And then the next season, it was fall ball. I was like, man, this really isn't that much fun anymore. Was still doing swimming, and it came down to the point where I was doing both at the same time. And I could have done both, kept going with it, but it just wasn't fun for lacrosse anymore. Still would play with my friends and everything when they were like having just throwing around and whatnot. But the games weren't fun because I didn't get to play as much as I was used to. And then the coaching staff was cool, but not as good as the coaches that I'd had. And so I made my point to the coach. I was like, hey, I don't really want to do this anymore. I just want to focus on swimming. And so quit the lacrosse team, but still play it all the time.
So they kind of, I mean, was there like a legacy aspect to it? The longer you were on the team, the more time you played.
Yeah.
So it
And
wasn't really about skill necessarily. It was like,
seniority. And that was my biggest thing because I thought they were great players. They really were. But we were getting scored on so much. And then when I get put in at like the last 3 minutes of the game, yeah, it's only 3 minutes, but it was still fast paced and they weren't scoring when I was in. So I was just like, not to toot my own horn, but I was like, I should maybe play a little bit more to see how far we can get. And I didn't like that aspect of like, oh, well, he's a senior. He's going to play before you.
I mean, the proof is kind of in the pudding, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if your goalie, for example, is in the game, how many quarters do you have?
4 quarters.
15 minutes each, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I'm watching my keeper play three like quarters and he gets scored on 4 times, and they put me in for even 15 minutes, and I don't get scored on, but they're averaging 1 score per quarter on this guy. I mean, statistically, if we keep doing that, it's showing that I should be able to at least maintain at least 1 to 2 quarters healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I guess that would be annoying. I mean, it's kind of my big thing when it comes to a lot of sports, and I had to kind of slow down on the sport aspect myself because while I had like I played soccer, and while I have a love for the game, it does get to a point where it's like, if we're not winning, why are we here?
Yeah, it's not fun
Like,
anymore.
I want to win, and I'm not gonna sit here and say like I was the best, footballer ever, because I definitely wasn't. I definitely, growing up, I didn't get to play a lot of sports. So my first real like throw into sports was probably like 8th grade
Mm-hmm.
with a rec league, and that was one of those. It was fun. That's what really made me fall in love with the game. It was like a pay to play. You pay it so you get time on the field. Whatever, everybody plays. Unisex, all that stuff. It was a good time. Um, and then when I got to high school, I made the freshman team, JV freshman, or JV as a freshman, and I rode the bench. Unless it was a blowout, which in reality, like when it comes to, obviously, like I don't know if you know anything about like soccer, but like if you don't really have blowouts,
Mm-hmm.
like there's really no such thing as blowout. It's very rare that you have a blowout. So like a blowout would be, you know, in the first, 30 minutes of the game, 30 to 45 minutes of an hour long game, because that's how long it was in high school. If we were like 3 up, by the second quarter, like that's a blowout. Like we're blowing this team away. So it's like, all right, we'll start rotating like our bench players in, our red shirts, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time you're locked 0-0, 1-1. the game's on the line. They're not going to throw red shirts in. So I had to really like work hard. And then I fell in love with it even more playing travel ball. That was real fun. I've gotten to play like I got to play at like the Disney Stadium, stuff like that. So it was a good time, but it kind of just got to a point where as I got older in the game, and I'm sitting here talking like I'm fucking retiring from this sport, but like as I got older in the game, just even in high school, like the younger guys were coming in and while they weren't bad, like they were decent, they didn't have like the discipline of like the players that when I came in, and they kind of got away with it. You know what I mean? So it was kind of one of those. It started to slowly transition, kind of how you were talking about, like not even really like a legacy. It just kind of turned into more of like well, you're here, you can play, and it was like, well, where was that mentality when like I was new? You know what I mean? Right. I had to earn my stripes. I had to like watch my teammates play the whole time, like doing one of those things like from the movie, like staring at the coach, like I'm ready,
yeah.
Like put me in, and he's like, shut up, and you're like, okay, so you went to college, all right, that's great. I mean, college education is great, I guess, depending on who you talk to. Some people will argue against it, that there's other means and other opportunities outside of a college degree, but you went. What were you majoring in? What were you trying to get?
So that first year, you're not decided, I guess you could say. So that first year, I was taking education classes because I really wanted to be a gym teacher. That was like my ultimate goal. I wanted to
a gym teacher?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to my high school and
tiny shorts and whistle, everything, the whole get up.
It's the easiest thing you do. Hey, go play basketball. I was like really into fitness and whatnot, and I wanted to teach because my mom's a teacher.
Fitness dick in your mouth.
Yeah. But go back home and like teach at the high school and everything. So I took some nutrition classes. I took an education class, the general studies that you have to take for your first year orientation and whatnot. And then I met my wife now, Courtney. She was a sociology major. And I was like, all right, what's sociology? It was really easy classes and like it was interesting to learn at the time. So then my sophomore year, I was like, all right, I'm going to be a soc major. So I started taking more sociology classes. When it came down to like the whole Black Lives Matter movement and like all that stuff, that's what we were primarily learning. Like, so I thought that was interesting to see like, all right, this is what I grew up learning back in a small country town pretty much. And then seeing the other side of it, I was like, all right, this is cool to see both ways of how people grow up and like those different norms and everything. And then junior year, COVID happened, so everything was online. Still doing sociology classes, learning how to do like statistics for taking questionnaires and like moving the quantitative, qualitative research and everything. I thought that was interesting, but everything was online, so it was a lot more difficult for me to learn because I wasn't in that small unit class where everybody's like getting to say something in person. And then senior year was gonna be in I think 2020, and everything was going down to COVID. Couldn't be in classes anymore. Still online. So I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I want to keep doing this online stuff. So started working more at Domino's because that's what I did growing up in high school. And then Courtney and I talked. I was like, I think that would be a good time to talk to a recruiter. So went and talked to the Navy recruiter, finished out my junior year. And then that summer when all the high school kids were graduating, I was just going to boot camp with them and told all my professors, I was like, hey, thanks for helping me along the way, but you don't have to worry about me. I'm not finishing out this school year. So I didn't fail out of college. I still had a 2.5, which isn't great, but I could go back and still pick up where I started, I feel like.
I mean, yeah, 2.5. I mean, I think some doctors have that GPA. I mean, yeah. So I mean, you're on track. You're on track for a doctorate. But so you just because I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I like to. You can give me all the instructions. You can teach it to me. You can preach it to me or whatever. But if I can't see it, if I can't touch it, like almost, you know what I mean? If I can't, kind of almost, tug on the old dress, on the old, sleeve of your arm and be like, hey, can you show me what you're talking about?
Yeah.
But that's interesting you say that. So you obviously, like you said, you came from more of like a small, probably predominantly white, I would say, area.
It was mixed. So like Charlottesville, you have more like Fluvanna County is more like rural. You have Scottsville, which is like that's country. Like people are growing up on farms, they're doing what they need to do, go to high school and everything, but they're still like out in the sticks almost. You go to Charlottesville, it's more city like areas because you have the not really big buildings, but you have UVA, which is a college area. You have the interstate and everything, so everybody's getting off and like going off to those areas. Richmond is the capital, so you have all that stuff over there. Like that's the city. So it was kind of a mix of everything. You kind of saw both, but still very close-minded people, I would say.
Okay, and then obviously being exposed to like kind of other cultures within college, like that kind
Hmm.
of like opened your minds to the potential adversities that other
Yeah,
cultures experience.
I
I
thought that
mean,
that was
that's
really
cool.
cool.
I mean, that's an interesting take, because I would say that's one of the biggest, controversies even today is like, are you actually being held back, if you're a minority, or are you just, a victim,
Hmm.
so I guess, that would be an interesting topic. Now, did you have people who kind of leaned the opposite way during those courses where they're like, I know what you're telling me, like all this movement and all this stuff, but like, it's not like that bad.
I feel like there were some cases where like people were allowed to speak their mind and have their own opinion, and our teachers were great because they wanted to hear both sides. So they wouldn't really like kick you out of the class if you said something outlandish, but they were like, "All right, I like what you said. Can anybody counter that and give your perspective on it?" So I thought that that was very engaging, and you could learn from both sides because that's what the sociologists are supposed to be doing is like getting that information and like putting it out into however they want to perceive it.
It's
But
almost like a devil's advocate kind of thing.
yeah,
Like I see where you're coming from, but have you looked at it from this
yeah,
perspective?
I thought that that was really cool to see.
So, but because I would say one of the biggest things that you see in colleges nowadays, or at least, and most of the stuff that we absorb, that we ingest nowadays, honestly, is just clips, right? Like
Hmm.
we clip, 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 clip. Like 90% of the time, I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm one of those people who like I'll see a clip of something, it could be anything, and while it looks interesting, I'm not about to go watch a 3 hour video. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? I'm not about to go watch the whole thing, find that part, let's dissect it together. And so, like, do you now, while your teachers hosted like a healthy learning environment, which is great because you hear so many colleges that kind of speak opposite of that
Hmm.
almost. If you were somebody who kind of leaned the opposite way of like, hey, like, it's not that bad, for example, were you marked almost like, I don't want to. I feel like racist is too strong of a word, but like someone who's not an ally, I think that's like a big word that's thrown around nowadays is ally.
Hmm.
Like from other students, like were you kind of like ostracized? Like, oh well, his or her views are a little, too conservative, so therefore they're against me.
I don't think that they would take it that way. I mean, they would obviously see like, all right, left, right. Like, I think they would kind of pick up like, all right, maybe we shouldn't not hang out with them, but they would still be welcomed. Like, it was still a welcoming community. You just maybe during that class you aren't looking forward to that person talking, but you're still gonna be nice to them and everything, and like hear what they have to say.
I think it's always funny when we talk about like any type of like political anything because the thing that people I feel like fail to remember is and I getting on the soapbox a little bit because while like we work for the government like you can still not agree with everything that the government does but one of the smartest funniest things I ever heard somebody say was actually when I was stranded. I say stranded, but our plane broke down. We had to land in Bulgaria. This was probably like 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I was hanging out with some guys, and we on the subject of like politics, left and right, Republican, Democrat. And this one guy, very quiet, guy, he pauses and he goes, there's no such thing as like a Democrat. I was like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, no, like people, us, yes,
Mm-hmm.
there's Democrats because we believe that there's Democrats. He's like, but in high forms of government, there's no such thing as Democrat. They're all Republicans. They're just a little less conservative because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it's all about how much money can I make.
Right.
They're like, it's not really for the people in all aspects. And I've always thought about that. How it's funny how we've been convinced that there's two sides of the coin when in reality as you get higher in the food chain, it starts really just becoming one side of the coin. Just like I said, like a little less conservative. You're like, abortions are cool. You can do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we're gonna get a little piece of that money. You know what I mean? So, but all right. So you met your now wife Courtney, and I've met her a few times. She's very lovely. So how did that come about? Because obviously you kind of, I don't want to say it is, you kind of followed in her footsteps for sociology to what, follow her back to her dorm room. You know? So
So lacrosse and swimming, I had friends on both teams. So my friend Sarah, she was also a swimmer and a lacrosse player. And I noticed that she would hang out with Courtney and everything. And obviously, it's a small campus, so you always see the same people multiple times a day. So Sarah and her were eating lunch one day, or eating dinner rather. And I was with the lacrosse guys, and it was getting to that point where I was just like, I don't really want to hang out with them as much as I used to my freshman year. So I went over and I sat down with Sarah and Courtney, just like small talk, because I knew Sarah, I didn't really know Courtney yet. And then I asked her, I was like, yo, like, she seen anybody? Like, trying to see if I could shoot my shot pretty much. And so we went to a party one night, a couple weekends later. And at this time, Courtney kind of knew who I was just from like seeing me and like having that small conversation with Sarah. And I, not gonna lie, I had gone there to meet another girl at the time, but she didn't show up. And but then I was still seeing Courtney in the crowd and everything. And I started going over just to dance, and Courtney grabbed my hand and we danced all night. And so that was like one of those little cliches, met at the party and everything. And then so once we met, I tried to talk to her a little bit more. So in Randolph, there's a little area called Skeller. That's like the student lounge. You can go get food, sit there and study. And she was always in this corner booth. And so I started to kind of like go there more, do my homework. So I was being more studious to get to see her a little bit. And so I started to text her. I was like, "Hey, do you want to like go out sometime?" She was very active in the school, so she did what's it called? The MAC. It was the Macon Activities Council, I think. She'll probably get mad at me for not knowing the actual acronym. But she was very involved in that. She was president of certain associations and everything. So she had a lot going on. And so whenever I asked her, like, hey, you want to hang out this week? Sorry, I have this going on. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you want to do something during the week? We ended up going up on a date, on a date. And then that's when I asked her, like, hey, do you want to be my girlfriend? So started doing that and everything. It's funny because one night when we were still just kind of like in that talking phase, I went and just got a yogurt from the Skeller because I just had gotten done practice, and there was no spoons. And so I was just sitting there at the little booth with her eating my yogurt with a fork. And so that was like one of those like haha moments that we always tell each other about. I was in a music class at the time, and one of our assignments was find an artist and then talk about one of their songs. So that was a talking point that I had with her. I was like, "Hey, what's your favorite song right now? Like, what are you listening to?" And she said that she was listening to, I want to say it was like Rush or some the one of the artists, and it was "Missing You Crazy."
mm.
And so I know that song by heart now. So that's like whenever it comes on, I think of that moment. And then she was a senior when I was a freshman and everything. So I take that back. It was still my freshman year, but she was a senior, and so that was like another like kind of like flexing. He's like, "Oh yeah, I met my wife when she was a senior and I was a freshman. Whatever."
So she's like 3 years older than you.
4 years.
Four.
Yeah,
Rob the cradle on
that's
that
what
one.
they always tell them.
Rob
Yeah.
the cradle.
And
Dang.
so she graduated. Uh, she ended up working at Amazement Square. It's a kids museum downtown. She went to Lynchburg College to do her master's in education, so she was still in the area. She had a little apartment that was right down the street from Randolph College, so I could walk over there, hang out with her still. She would come stay with me my sophomore year because I was a residential advisor, so I had my own room. It was funny because her little ID for like getting into the dorms and everything, it never cut off, so she could still walk in and out, and I never have to like open the door for her. So that was kind of convenient. And she was still friends with all of our friends, so we'd hang out still, go to the parties and whatnot. All while she was in grad school and going to work. And then COVID happened, and so during the summers and everything, I would be at home in Charlottesville and Fluvanna County and working. And so I'd work like a Wednesday, Thursday, and then that Thursday evening I would drive to Lynchburg for the weekend and just hang out with her. And so kind of that was like our first little take at like living together. And then when COVID hit, that's when I kind of just moved in with her. and just did all my online classes at her apartment while she was still working.
Now you guys pretty much shared the same major, and you had a 2.5, which, like I said, I'm not discrediting it. It is what it is. But she wouldn't just like slide you a few answers or
So
what?
she would help me out a lot with like my classes and whatnot. Like she wouldn't type anything up for me really, but if I needed help, she would tell me like where I should look for certain
Right.
things. But when it comes to like, I wasn't trying to like follow in her footsteps for it, but it was easy for me. It was interesting, so that's why I wanted to do it. And our college advisor, Dr. Courier, she was a big role for picking that course too, because she was one of those professors. It was like, hey, I like what you're saying. Let me hear it from somebody else, so that way we can. She always said, "This is the full circle." I loved when she would come to the end of the class because she would start with something and then bring it all the way back to that same thing after hearing 20 different people make their own opinions about it and statements. And so that was a big thing for me too because I wanted to be in her classes. I wanted to hear what she had to say. And she was Courtney's college advisor. She ended up being my college advisor. And then she ended up being the one that married us actually.
Oh
So
wow.
she's a big role in our life.
Okay. So I mean, you looked a lot different then. You know, you had
Yeah.
really long hair. For obviously, you guys wouldn't know this, but Connor had how far would you say? At
uh,
least longer than shoulder length, right?
yeah, it was like down to my butt almost.
Jeez. All right. Well, so you were a hippie.
Yeah, I was a stoner.
Yeah. You got a waiver?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So getting high, eating Dominoes, met your wife, fell in love with her. A real, fairy tale story. That's, awesome. COVID hit, and obviously, like everyone can really attest to, there was like only a few ways that you could go in COVID that, like, I've seen. Right, you either became some type of social media influencer because that's all you had.
Mm-hmm.
You either had some type of job, which even then, like most of the jobs were remote. Which is funny to me. I saw a thing the other day, and it was like only us, like as Americans and or just as people in general, would film ourselves not working
Yeah.
to work, like to fuck ourselves, so we'd have to go back to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's ridiculous. So like for me, when COVID hit, I was deployed, and so we would pull into a port and we'd have to stay on the ship. That was the longest deployment I ever did. It was about 10 and a half months.
Mm-hmm.
It was ridiculous. And it was nice in the sense that we were never exposed. So for me, my COVID experience is a lot different than obviously people who were trapped in the States, the lockdown. So that, like, we were locked down obviously on the ship, but like we were never exposed. Like, nobody came on, nobody came off. Like, and we quarantined ourselves before like quarantine was even like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The most annoying part was masks. Like, masks became a thing, even on the ship, which was crazy to me because we had quarantined
Yeah.
ourselves. We're in the middle of the ocean. Like, what are we doing? Why are we wearing a mask? But they'd freak out about it. So obviously you didn't finish college, which nothing wrong with that. You can be successful anywhere nowadays if you really put the time and effort into it. So you Navy.
Mm-hmm.
First choice, second choice, just the only door that was open.
That's what I wanted to do because I graduated high school in 2018. All my friends joined out of high school. So Jared, Riley, Roy, Jamie, like those were my best friends. I played lacrosse with them. Riley was Jared's girlfriend at the time, so like, we all worked at Domino's together pretty much. They all joined out of high school, and they're all almost first classes now. Got out as seconds, were successful. So I was like, all right, yeah, Navy seems to be the best route. And so I only went and talked to the Navy recruiter. I didn't want to talk to anybody else because I was set on just joining the Navy. And it was cool because the chief, Chief Coleman, I think it was, MMC, he saw my paperwork and he saw that I had put down like people. It was like you put down people that might have referred you or whatever. And then he saw that I was from Savannah, but I was still in Lynchburg at the time because that's where the recruiting office was. And he was like, "Oh, you're from Fluvanna?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, he saw the names that I put for like who I knew that was in the Navy, and he was like, "You know Welling and Roseman?" I was like, "Yeah, those are my best friends." He was like, "I was their recruiter. Like they were my first group of poolies that he had for in Charlottesville." I was like, "Oh, small world." And so I thought that was cool that that's my first impression of the Navy is like my friends know this person. He's gonna help me get to where I want to get. and get to where they are. So I thought that was pretty cool to see.
That is cool. So you were married at this time before joining?
So we were still together, just dating. 2020 is when I enlisted. Was it 2020? Might have been 21. Yeah, it was 21. So I enlisted in 21 of January, and it was January 6th. And then we had already planned like to get married and everything. And so if I had stayed in college, I was going to propose my senior year, go that whole senior year of us being engaged. And then once I graduated, we were going to get married that following summer. But it kind of just fast tracked because since COVID was a factor, I was just like, oh, I mean, if you get married to me now while I'm in, you'll go wherever I go. So that was something that she supported me with. So we got married on January 17th of 21. So it was a few weeks after I enlisted. So that way when we get to boot camp and everything, she's already like the paperwork's done. Like she'll be my spouse and dependent and everything. And so once I left for boot camp that summer, um, there was the June and July, graduated in August. And then once I came home, we went to Virginia Beach and everything for my first duty station.
Okay, so kind of reverted back to
Yeah.
it from. That's cool. All right, so when you joined, what were you doing? What was your job?
So I was undesignated. So I didn't have a rate or anything yet. I didn't want to pick something and hate my life for 5 years. And so I was just like, all right, I'll just do this for 3 because you had to pick a rate by the second year for the PAC program. And so I was undes fireman. I was like, all right, cool. If I do fireman, I can do engineering stuff. I could still learn a skill that I could carry with me if I wanted to get out after that first contract. And it was something that I thought would benefit me because a lot of my friends in college were engineer majors, but it wasn't the same type of engineering. They're doing like learning how to build structures and bridges and stuff. I'm just turning wrenches for machinery, which was still cool. I learned a lot. So when I got to the ship, I was on CVN 77, the George H.W. Bush in Norfolk, Virginia. I get there. I'm a part of A Gang, which is the auxiliary division for engineering. Um, when I checked in, I went down to what was it? What part of A Gang was it? ACNR, I think is the acronym for it. They did all the coolant for the ships, like anything with refrigeration, like the galley equipment, making sure the AC is working for the ship, making sure that certain spaces are having that temperature level that needs to be at. That's what they were doing. And then so I was like, all right, cool. I'll be learning how to do this stuff. So I was with them for like 2 weeks, and then an opening came up in the cryo shop for O2 and 2, and so I went up there, and it was kind of a blessing in disguise because they were working with cryogenics, so I got to learn how to use the nitrogen machine, turn nitrogen into liquid oxygen, and then turn that into pure oxygen, which is what the medical department and the aviators would use for if there's like an operation, or that's what the aviators are breathing in when they go fly and everything. So I got to learn how to do all that stuff. But it was nice because when I was underway with them, they had a computer that was always open, so I could always like email Courtney and everything to check in with her. And the crew that I worked with was great. MM2 Massey, she's a really good friend of ours. She's met Daxton and everything when he was born. My one of my best friends, Tyler Calumet, I met him, and he was originally with security at the time when I met him. And so I was asking him, I was like, hey, how do I get to do what you're doing? He's like, oh, you just got to ask, like, it was ISF for them, the Import Security Forces. And I had asked around, I was like, hey, can I go do what he's doing? And they're like, nah, you're not going to like that. The work schedule's terrible. The MAs don't have off time. And I was like, oh, okay. So that, it kind of deterred me for a few months. And then there was one day, I think we were having a Raz or something, so everybody was on a working party just moving the equipment and the supplies that we had just got for restorage. And it was Emmanuel Martinez was like, he just asked us if he could plug in his radio to our shop. And we're like, yeah, sure. And he was one of the first classes that was in charge of training. And I was like, hey, Emmanuel, like, how can I get a part of ISF and everything? He was like, oh, you just got to sign up for Surf Bravo. I was like, can I be an MA with a drug waiver? He was like, yeah, why not? You just got to do a little more extra paperwork. And I was like, all right, cool. From that day forward, I was like, I'm going to do MA stuff. And so I had my engineering chain of command back me up. I was I was talking to the security department before I even went to the Surf Bravo class. I was like, I'm on Des. I want to strike MA. This is what I want to do. Like, I want to do something that I feel like is gonna help people. And all right, cool. So went to the Surf Bravo class. Had everything signed off before I even went there. So as soon as I graduated, had to wait like a week and a half or so, and then I was with them because how it worked out, Calumet was going to be getting out in a month or so from security, but still attached to the ship. So we worked it out to where it was kind of one for one swap. He's coming back to the cryo shop to do his rate because he was an MM. I'm taking his spot in security, so they still had a sailor that was going to be able to stand post pretty much. So we kind of just expedited it to where as soon as I graduated, I waited like a week and a half and I took his spot. And then I was with security full time for a year and a half until I left the ship.
That's awesome. For those of you, obviously, who are watching who might not know, so the way the Navy works is we go by rates. Other branches of the military, they use what's called MOS, right? And that's like your designator for your job. For us, we're MAs, or formerly known as Master at Arms. Don't let the name fool you. You're not really a master of anything. You're a jack of all trades, master of none. But what is it? Better to be a jack of all trades than a master of none,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But in layman's terms, we're police. Uh, you know, now we're not your run of the mill police. I would say that the master arms rate within the Navy, and this is not a plug for the Navy. Please don't think this is a recruiting video, because it's not. It definitely is not. But MAs do have one of the most versatile rates in the Navy. You could be a police officer. You could do expeditionary. I've done that. That was fun. Protecting ships against like pirates and things like that. You can go work in squadrons, so work around airplanes, things like that. So you can be on the ships, things of that nature. So it's a really versatile rate. So I'm really glad that you struck MA. Connor here is probably one of the better MAs that I've ran into in my career, and I've ran into a lot, like a lot, and some are really good and some are really bad. And I would say you're definitely up there with the level of integrity and all that stuff that you bring to the job. So it's good to keep people in line, good order and discipline, whatnot. But let me hop off of it, you know what I mean? Because, right. So how was your first, how was your boot camp experience? Because I joined in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So my boot camp experience might differ from your boot camp experience.
So it was during COVID time still. So that summer we had to do a like 2 week quarantine, 10 days, and that's what you had to do when you checked into boot camp. So I checked in June 2nd. That's when we arrived, went through the flags and everything, and so we got all of our stuff and went to the compartment, and you had to wear a mask. So you did your quarantine stuff for the 2 weeks, and then pretty much who you quarantined with, that was your division. So we had two quarantine compartments, one and one, and they either combined to be the whole division, or that would be your brother div for your boot camp experience. And so we had to do stuff with masks. When it came to like physical training, you could relax it. Like we wouldn't be running in our masks or like doing battle stations or anything, but we still had to wear them while we were in the compartment. Couldn't relax them really. Um, it got to a point like halfway through where we could, but then somebody said something. They're like, "Oh well, if the RDCs don't have to wear masks, why do we have to wear masks?" So then the RDCs had to start wearing them too. So that was kind of like a little fuck you to them. Like, all right, you got to be like us still. And then there was no graduations where people could attend because of COVID. So our division and like whole training group rather was the first graduation where people could attend again. So that was kind of interesting to see because most graduations prior to that they would just be recording it and people would have to watch online. And so then we actually had a real graduation experience where your families could come, you could see them afterwards and everything. So that was interesting. I didn't have anybody come to mind because I was like, I don't really. I'm a very, what's it called? I don't see things as like, oh, I need this to have an experience. I'm just like, all right, cool, I did it. So I didn't really have anybody come visit me. I was just like, yeah, I don't want y'all to waste your money. Just I'll send the video link or whatever. Because they were still recording it at the time, also.
Yeah, my grandparents, my mom came out to my graduation, but like boot camp, obviously I was way before COVID and stuff like that. Years, almost, but like a decade before. Um, but it was pretty interesting. It was a shell shock for me when I went to boot camp. I had a pretty relaxed childhood. Kind of there was there was order and there was discipline. You know, my mom did like run our house with a pretty like iron fist. You know, it was a pretty tight ship, but still like there was no question like if I wanted to stay out or whatever. So joining an environment where I had somebody like 100% dictating like this is when you're gonna wake up, this is where you're gonna eat, this is all the way down to pretty much like this is when you're gonna use the bathroom, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you just really had to shut off your brain and just like do it. That was kind of a like a culture shock for me. And then obviously I grew up in a very well, now it's gotten bigger, but when I grew up in a more like rural, small area. Um, you know, it was mixed. Like we had, you know, whites, Mexicans, blacks. Like so, it wasn't like just culturally like one, you know, race. But for example, like when I joined, I had a very thick Southern accent,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always funny when I see somebody post something on like Facebook or Instagram or something like that I grew up with, and their accent is ridiculous, right? And so it's like, did I sound like that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my gosh, right? But one of my favorite stories that I always like to think back to is because there was really no filter for people when I came in. So like leadership and stuff like that. Like now it's obviously like a little bit more watered down. It's a I don't want to say it's a cakewalk. You know, everyone has their own experiences, and everybody's gonna, you know, take boot camp or any type of training like in their own way. Some people will think that it's hard. Some people will think it's really easy. Some people want it to be harder, and some people want it to be easier, right? Like, so it all depends on the person. But I knew I was in for a life changing experience when I arrived. So when uh, when I did the recruiters, my recruiters they give you the cup to go pee in the bathroom and whatever, and they would just give you the cup. You'd go in the bathroom, you'd pee, and they would do like a basically at home drug test,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd be like, all right, you're clean, whatever. We can go to the next process. Send you to MEPS and whatever, right? Well, my recruiter was very honest with me from the beginning. He was like, when you join, it's going to be trash in the beginning because you're the new guy. Expect to sweep, mop, be there late, whatever, right? So he's very honest. Which with any type of job, in my opinion, like when you start at the bottom, like it's the worst. Um, it does get even more difficult as you rise through the ranks, but in a different way. While you rise through and you change out your broom for like paperwork,
Mm-hmm.
to help others and stuff like that. But anyways, but my recruiter was very honest, and one of the things he told me, he said, "Hey man, I'm just gonna let you know, when you do a piss test at boot camp, it's not going to be conducted the same way that it's here. You don't just get a cup and you go in the bathroom. It's going to be like almost like an open area, and you're going to have somebody staring at you. Like they're going to be
That's
looking
all
at
they're
they're
doing.
going to be looking at your junk. Like that is their responsibility for that moment. So if you potentially have a problem with that, like you make sure you're hydrated. Make sure you need to pee.
Mm-hmm.
So I drank so much water that I was like almost crippled over in pain. Like I didn't even want to call home because that's how bad I had to pee. I was like I don't care about calling anybody. Like let me use the bathroom. So they end up being like, okay, who here needs to use the restroom? And I'm like, I do. Like right off the bat, right? And a bunch of people they raise their hands, and we go in. We're all at these urinals or whatever, and we all have all these chief petty officers. They're sitting there staring at us or whatever. And I guess one of the guys, his recruiter, did not tell him that he was going to be watched, and he was in fact a very shy peer. So all of a sudden, this chief starts yelling at this guy, which you're already stressed out. It's a new experience, culture shock. You're away from home, probably for one of the first times in your life, and now you got your fucking dick in your hand with a dude staring at you, and then he starts yelling at you, and this guy starts going off. He starts going, you've been in the Navy for 5 minutes. You're a liar. Like you said, you had to pee. Like, what are you doing? Blah, 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 all this stuff. And all of a sudden, it kind of gets quiet for a second. Like, he gets quiet for a second, the chief does. And he's like, hey, chief. And he yells at another chief. And the chief's like, yeah. And he goes, this guy's crying with his dick in his hand. The guy had his shit in his hand with the cup. And he was so stressed out and he was so scared and he's being yelled at that he started crying. And they just were like, get out of here. Like, he zips up and he walks around. And what's funny is, I don't know if they did this when you were in boot camp, but if you couldn't pee, but you tried and you couldn't, they made you walk this big circle next to a water fountain. So you'd walk this big circle, and every time you hit the water fountain, you had to take a sip.
Yep.
And then you just kept walking and sip, walk and sip. And then by the end of it, I didn't have to do that, fortunately, but by the end of it, it was just this Congo line of people just like sip, 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 sip. Like it was crazy. And I also was one of the people who got yelled at within the first 5-10 minutes of being at boot camp. But it wasn't my fault. But nobody wanted to listen. So when I left my recruiting station, right, and they sent us to like it was the final stages of MEPS, and then you fly out from like MEPS. They put you in the nice hotel room. Your last like good night sleep. Before you go and get like yelled at, and you PT and you learn all the remedial things. There was like 12. I want to say it was like 12 or like 16 of us. It was somewhere in there. It was like an odd number. And they ended up putting all of our packages in one manila envelope. They gave it to one of the guys, which would be fine, but they separated our flights. So there was like 4 of us that went on a later flight, and then the rest of them, they went on an earlier flight. So I have copies of all my paperwork. And I show up, and there's that little cart where you're supposed to drop your folder or whatever. So I am talking to the people who meet us at the airport. They make you empty out any contraband. They make you get rid of like if you have cigarettes, tobacco, anything like that. They make you throw it away. And then they load you up on the bus and they take you down to Great Lakes Naval Base. And I'm telling this guy, because I'm thinking this guy is somebody. I actually did not know at the time that these people were just in a temporary holding unit. So they were also like seamen. They were E3s, E2s. Like they also had only been in the Navy probably like outside of boot camp, like a week. And so I'm asking this guy, like thinking he's important, like, hey man, so these guys showed up before me. I don't have like my original stuff. I have copies. What do you want me to do? And he was like, oh, that's fine. Just put your copies. Like, where they tell you to put your stuff, just put it there. So I did. And I'm sitting out, in the kind of the open foyer area with all the desks. And I hear, Hector. And then they say my last name, and I'm like, there's no way. And then they call out the last 4 of my social security number. I was like, oh no. So I'm like, I start going over there, like, hurry up. So I run over there. And the guy's like, what is this? And he's holding all the copies of my paperwork. And I try to explain to him. I was like, sir. He's like, I'm not a sir. I work for a living. He gives you the enlisted speech, whatever. And I was like, they left before me. Like, this is what I had. I talked to the guy at the airport, and he was like, you're a liar. You're a liar. And I was like, I'm not lying. He's like, stand at attention when you're talking to me and shut your mouth. So I'm like, standing. And I was like, it's not even my fault. Like, when am I getting yelled at? And he was like, I can already tell what kind of guy you are. You're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. You're a loser, aren't you? Like, I can already tell. And so you get different inspections in boot camp, and it's on a grading system. Like when I went through, like a 5 was the highest grade that you could get for each inspection. And for whatever reason, I mean, it was honestly probably the best point of that moment probably saved me in reality, because I was so angry, and I felt like I had something to prove. To this day, don't remember the guy's name, don't even remember his face. It's such a blur, it's such a fever dream. But all I do remember is that feeling of being belittled the moment I stepped through the door, and like being told that like I wouldn't make it, that I would be unsuccessful, especially like in boot camp. That I was like, it was a good turning point for me, like, in that moment, because I was like, I'm gonna prove this guy wrong. And I made it a mission to be the best that I could be, like during that experience, and get all 5s, all high marks on all my inspections. And I did. It didn't benefit me any. I mean, they didn't give me like extra rank or anything like that, but so but it was one of those things where it's like, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Like 100%, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Like I'm gonna be the best sailor that's ever walked through these doors. You're on the bush. You strike MA. You get MA. Now you're in MA. You're married. You're living the life. And then you get your first duty station as MA,
Hmm.
which is Kings Bay Naval Base. Now, we can't really talk too much about it, right? But how would you say your experience thus far as an actual badge wearing MA? How do you think your experience, one, having a little bit of life experience, unlike a lot of these guys who are joining, right? They joined out of high school, just like your friends did. So you have a little bit more life experience. Two, you actually know what it's like to kind of be like dumped on because you were on an actual ship, and ship life can be hard. Like, that's just the reality of it. So you see these new guys coming in. So your experiences thus far, like, how do you think it has benefited you, and like what has your experience been so far? Like, positive, negative, you love it, you hate it, kind of in the middle. Like, what are you thinking?
I love it. I mean, a lot of my friends on the ship, they started off either Kings Bay or up in Bangor, and so they told me, they're like, yeah, if you start off there, you're gonna set yourself up for success. They're all seconds and first classes now, and so when I was in A school, I didn't really get to pick like everybody else did, where they have that sheet of paper for all the students that they could pick where they want to go for their orders. If you were if you were in the reserves, or if you were a fleet returnee coming from another ship where you're cross rating, or another rate where you were cross rating into it, or on Des, you would just call the detailer. And so it was Washington, Kings Bay, Bahrain, or Guam. And I was like, all right, well, I don't really want to go to Bahrain yet because we had Daxton and he was only two at the time, or getting ready to be two. And Guam, I was like, Guam would be cool. I had some friends from the ship that had just recently PCS'd over there, so I would know some people. And I was like, I don't like the cold, so I don't want to go Washington. Georgia, all right, we'll do that because it's closest to North Carolina, where Courtney's from, and then still not a far drive from Virginia to where we could visit, or they could come visit us. So I was like, yeah, we'll go Kings Bay. My friends had been there. They told me everything that I could possibly know about it, so I could like prepare myself. And so it's cool because St. Mary's, where we live, is like a small town where Courtney and I are used to. We're still 30 minutes away from Yulee, or 30 minutes away from Jax, where we could go to the city if we wanted to and do stuff. And then it's a small base where the MWR is like perfect, because at Norfolk, like, it's a huge base. Everybody is moving around and stuff. You don't really get to experience much unless you go looking for it. But like here, they put so much information out, like, hey, we're doing this event where we have this opportunity for families to go do stuff. So that's what we like about it. And then like working with the Marines, that's what they told me about. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get to do some cool stuff. You're gonna be under that Marine structure and everything. So I was looking forward to it. Um, it was my first take at like being an NCO, because like when it comes to the Navy, you are, as a third class, E4 and below is E4 and below. You're not like anything really until you hit E5, and you can actually have like a little pushback with some stuff. So that was something that was new to me, because they were like, in orientation, they're like, yo, you're a third class, like you actually mean something here, because corporals in the Marines are leading freaking squads and stuff. So I thought that was interesting to see. Drop in the Bravo section, best section in the waterfront. So I think that I was very lucky and blessed to be with a crew that actually like cares about this place and like is pushing for stuff to be good. Met a lot of great people to that know mutual friends of mine. So it was cool. Like, hey, do you know this person? Like, oh yeah, I just left that command. Like, we were at this command together. So like having that small Navy interaction with people has been nice. And then the work itself is, it's cake. Like, we just sit there and do what we need to do and then go home, and that's what I like about it.
I mean, that's good. I mean, again, not a plug for the Navy, but that's really what the military in general is.
Hmm.
I mean, outside of, knock on wood, outside of war,
Hmm.
like, it really is almost. I mean, I say this very loosely because it's not this type of schedule, but it really is almost like a 9 to 5.
Hmm.
Like, you go to work, you do what you need to do, and then you go home. You see your family, and so that, like, I'm not gonna lie, there are some days like we get called in and we have to be there on the off, what should be an off day, whatever the case may be. But it's it's probably the easiest job that I've ever done. Like for me, before I joined, one of the big motivators for me was I work construction from about 15 to roughly like 18. So only 3 years. So I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not a guy out here who's done, the craziness that these other guys have done who've worked in the trades for years and years and years. However, I would see guys who were 40, 38, 40, 45, and you still have 20 years left of work
Hmm.
before you can like officially retire. And these guys, their bodies were just so broken. You know what I mean? And like a lot of them still love the job. They love like the blue collar work and stuff. But I realized I was like, I I don't want to like break my body for, I'm going to be 38, 40, 45, whatever, and like rolling out of bed and like I can barely walk. I've worked for guys or worked with guys for guys who can't, due to like work incidents, is like can't even like close their fists completely. Like they close their hands like this, because they've like broken all their fingers and stuff. And I'm like, that's not something that I see like I want for my future, and I'm not saying people can't be successful because they definitely can, um, but if you're not owning the job site, if you're not like the foreman, if you're, you know what I mean, like if you're not like a lead, like, and you're just a like a bricklayer, like
Hmm.
it's horrible. And I was like, you know what, let me join something else, and unfortunate at the time I wanted to join the Marine Corps, but unfortunate at the time, one, uh, like their stipulations for joining were like almost like obnoxiously crazy, and two, we in 2011, I mean, it wasn't as bad as the beginning, but it kind of started ramping up a little bit more. Was the kind of like our war effort over like Afghanistan, Iraq, so that,
Hmm.
and looking into like the statistics, it was like pretty much the point man, the first guy through the door, like stood a pretty much like a high like 70-80% chance of like being injured,
Hmm.
injured or death. And who do you think the point men's are? The new guys. Like
Yeah.
you put the new guy in the front, you know what I mean? And so I was like, I don't really want to. I don't really want to just go just to be a meat shield. And for anybody who's watching, if you had that role, like I commend you, but like I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just run into a room. And I know, knowing myself now, I know that at that time of my life, I would have had no problem doing that. I would have had no problem running into a room thinking I'm invincible and I would be in a box.
Hmm.
Like, I would have done something dumb that either would have put myself or others in jeopardy thinking I'm going to be the hero. Like, and so, like, I'm glad I personally joined the Navy. The Navy's been a great experience thus far. And while I still wake up with aches and pains, from the job, I still got all 10 toes, 10 fingers, and, probably at least a good 70 to 80% mobility. There are days that bending over and picking something up
You're
hurts
like,
more.
ah.
Yeah, it hurts more than it did, 10 years ago. But that's also with age. I mean, I'm aging myself a little bit, but I'm 32 now, so it's like, oh, not too much longer before you got to take me out to pasture.
Yeah.
So getting I mean, kind of bringing it back a little bit more about yourself. So, I know first time I ever met Connor, we talked or whatever, and he we're not really overly, but very very passionately expressed to me your love for music.
Yeah.
So your love for music is so great, right? And you see how music, or like we were talking about, like different movies that you've watched, you're like, oh, like I don't mind this song, but I think this song would have been better. So why is that something that you think in the future you'd pursue, like being the sound, like, I don't want to say sound guy, but like the, hey, like the musical, like we should use this for this or whatever the case may be.
I don't think I would ever really like do a job for it, but like when I was in high school, I took a TV production class. I was in choir, so like music was kind of like one of those things that I did for the extracurricular activities. Like you have your basic classes, and then you have like that fun class that you do. Choir was something that I was interested in because it was just you got to sing, cool. And then the TV production class, we were learning how to make videos. Like this video that we're doing right now, like we would learn how to cut it. We would learn how to edit it, put soundtracks underneath the talking points, make sure that if we had a green screen, we learned how to put the images behind it and stuff. So I thought that was really fun and entertaining for me. And one of the big projects that we had to do was a no sound project. So we had to take a clip from a video or make our own video with no sound at all, and you had to pull from other clips, and you'd have to try to line it up with what the people were saying to where if it was I used a clip from the Notebook and it was completely silent, but I had my friends talking, and we tried to match up what they were saying for their dialogue with what we were saying. So it was just random stuff, but it matched up with the movement of their lips. So I thought that was interesting to do.
So it's kind of like those. I don't know if you ever seen those videos where they have they take the footage from like football games or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like the bad lip reading.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, today I'm gonna go eat a hot dog, and they're like calling plays, and they're like, I'm gonna eat a hot dog. And it's like, I'm gonna eat 6. You know,
Yeah.
like that's cool.
And then
So it was like an AV club essentially.
yeah, I guess so. And then we had like the daily news channel that we had was called In the Know. And so if you were a part of TV production class, the crew, you would learn how to use the actual news equipment. You had the people in the back doing like the soundboard and everything. You'd have the director for the day, and we had like the schedule, or like how we would refer to it as like the watch bill. Like, hey, you're camera 1 today. You're gonna be camera 2. These 2 are the anchors. You're gonna be on sound booth. Like, so you got to learn a little bit of everything, and you would learn all the different cues. You would learn all the different how to make the dialogue for the prompt. Like, all right, we know that this person on the anchor today reads a little bit slower. Let's make sure that we don't go too fast. Like little stuff like that. And at the end of the class, you would learn. You would take the test, and that score could kind of put you in the ballpark to actually go working for like the local news company in the future if you wanted to.
Huh.
And Mr. Small was the teacher, and he's still teaching it and everything. And the Charlottesville Film Festival, or like whatever the film festival is for wherever the area is that they want to showcase themselves at, they can make a little movie or a little docu series, and they could put it out to the film festival, and they could get ranked in.
So it was almost like one of the, what is it, the indie like Sundance
Yeah,
film festival kind of
something
thing.
like that. And so to bring back the music into it, we were learning all these different the films and everything. Like, all right, he would play a film, and the different like scenes and the cuts and everything, and like the music behind it. And I was like, all right, that's a interesting choice of music. And then like how you were saying, I think it could make or break a film. So when it comes to like Pitch Perfect, they talk about when she's in the field or whatever, and she's talking about the music and everything, like how the Breakfast Club, it has that outro song. Like if it was a different song, it could have been a horrible outro for that movie. But since they picked that one, it's like, all right, that's perfect.
It
Kind of
becomes like
gives you
iconic.
chills. Yeah.
Right, like don't you
Yeah.
forget about
Like little stuff like that that just makes or breaks a movie.
And yeah, especially with the Breakfast Club, like I mean, iconic film, literally a cult classic, you know. And if you've never seen it, go watch it. It's phenomenal. It's very interesting. I think the only thing is I mean, but it doesn't. I mean, it kind of fits to the time and history. I don't think there was any black people in it, right? It was all white people.
Yeah, I think
Right?
so. Yeah.
Right, but it was an interesting take of like all the almost like melting pot of different people being raised. You know, you had the kid who was being abused, you had the girl who's kind of the outsider, and
Mhm.
she was so quiet that everybody made up stories about her. You had the really popular girl who wanted everyone to like her, but that ended up kind of giving her the title of slut even though
Mhm.
she wasn't. You had the jock who fell out of the love with the game, but his dad was so much into like, you got to play the game,
Following
that
his
you know,
footsteps.
following his footsteps, you're gonna go pro. You had the authoritarian teacher who, while I would like to believe had like their best interest at heart, was not. He was too linear. He was like, this is the way you do it, and this is how you're successful. Like, and you're trying to do it this way, absolutely not. You're gonna fail. So
Mhm.
get back over here. And the only way I know how to get you back here is to like yell at you and belittle you. And then at the end, it's iconic. Like I said, when he throws up his fists and, don't you forget about me. And it ties in because if you think about it, like, it's not, it's true. Like, don't you forget about me in the experience that I've shared with you,
Hmm.
because now you have an insight on all of our lives. You know what I mean? Like the jock, the cheerleader, the stoner, the loner, the nerd, stuff like that. So it was really interesting. So speaking of like movies and music, what would you say in your opinion is the best genre? Like, you're like, these genres, like, 9 times out of 10 never miss when it comes to music.
Think like rock and roll, like the classic like 80s, 90s, like not grunge, but like kind of getting to that point where like 10 Things I Hate About You, like that soundtrack is phenomenal. You have like the stereotypical huge high school, and then every song is like a rock and roll song, and it's like that time era. It goes into the time era too, I guess. So like I like those kind of oldies but newbies types of movies where it's 2024, but they're still making a movie where it's like these kids are in the growing up in the 80s and 90s, or like if it's the 70s, you got like the classic disco music, like Forrest Gump. You have him growing up in all these different time eras, and then you can see how the music and the style of music is changing, how it's going towards. You have the disco, then you have the grunge, you have the R&B, maybe like stuff like that, or the Lost Boys. Like it's that same song that's playing the entire movie for all those different cutscenes, but like if it was a different song, it might have been a completely different movie style. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
So, I mean, going back, do you think you would have done anything different? I mean, so like for me, right? Like, there are several things that I would do differently. However, I've always said that I would do different things in my life way different. If I could take what I know now, the old saying, take what I know now and go give it to myself in the past. Um, my whole life would be different. However, I wouldn't take that deal unless I was able to meet my wife, because my wife
Yeah.
has given me a beautiful daughter. Your wife has given you a beautiful son. But is there anything that you're like, man, if I knew that part of my life wasn't affected, would you have maybe like just joined the Navy right out of high school?
Yeah. I think I always say like, oh, I shouldn't have never went to college, but it's just because of the debt. That's the only reason why I don't like college. But if I didn't go, I would have never met my friends. I would have never met Courtney and had Daxton. So like, it plays into everything happens for a reason. But if I could go back and maybe still go to college where I could meet her and everything, maybe I wouldn't go undes. Maybe I would push to try to go MA because since I had the drug waiver, I couldn't go straight in as an MA or a corpsman because those were like the two rates. Were like, oh, drugs are bad, you can't do that. But if I knew that at the time, maybe I would have tried to be like, all right, hey, I know I have this waiver that I could get. Could I just go ahead and do that now? And then go in as a fucking MASN rather than a fireman and have no rate at all. I feel like I would have tried to do that and see where things could have taken me because maybe I still go to the ship, but I'll be on that ship for 3 years instead of two. And then maybe I'll still go to Kings Bay, but at that point, maybe I'll be a second class because I could have picked up on the ship
Right.
rather than having to graduate A school and then make MA3. I think that would have been a different turn if I didn't go on DES. But I still would feel like I could have joined the Navy, even if it meant down the line I met Courtney because we didn't meet at college, but we met somewhere else. I think that would be the only thing is that I have to meet her.
I mean, family's important. I mean, I wouldn't give up my family for anything. I think overall that's been one of the greatest things that I've been blessed with in my life. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes, I become blinded to it, and I'm not always the best husband, stuff like that. But like, I wouldn't change anything
Mm-hmm.
when it came to that. If right now Genie popped up or whatever the case, and they were like, "Hey, we could send you back. You can do everything different, and you can know what you know now." I probably wouldn't do it. And it's actually kind of funny. I've talked to Lynn about this before, and I was like, "You're 3 years younger than me. Do you know how weird it would be if I was like 20, or I'd have to be 21, and be like, somehow get a hold of you when you're like 18,
Mm-hmm.
and just be like, hey, you don't know me. This is gonna sound weird. I've lived this life before. You're supposed to be my wife." Like, I was like, do you know how insane that would be? Either A, you're gonna be like, I trust you, or you're gonna be like, this guy is a lunatic.
Psh, pepper
Like,
spray.
yeah, like I'm like, no, please, like love me. So what's your overall take on the military? Like, do you like the direction it's going? Do you want to see change? If you do want to see change, like what's the thing that you would change in the military?
I think the biggest thing for me that keeps me in is like just the benefits. Like we were able to have Daxon almost for free. Anything that she's had to encounter for like surgeries, whatever, like it's paid for. Doctor's visits are paid for. We get health care that is literally perfect to where if you were trying to get that in a normal job, you have to pay X amount of money for it. So that's like the thing that keeps me in to like see the change. I don't know. I feel like we're on the right path where we're starting to get those little bit of extra increases in money to where people that are serving the country are actually making something rather than they're only getting the benefits for the healthcare, like the college and everything. You're still getting a little bit of money in your paycheck to where you could live comfortably rather than if you didn't do that at all. When it comes to like I guess like leadership stuff, the only thing that I don't like is when it comes to leadership because you have people that are in long enough to where they're gonna make that rank because they either deserve it or because they're just in long enough to where they have to make it. And then you get people that are coming in that are they could be a piece of shit on the streets and they turn themselves around to where like, yeah, this is better in my life. Or they're still a piece of shit and they're just not getting kicked out because they're still doing what they need to do to stay in. I feel like if there were restrictions on the recruitment stuff to where there wasn't a quota that recruiters have to meet, that maybe it could keep people out that don't really need to be in, or it could just really like you need to get in line before you go to this process, or else you're just gonna ruin everything still.
Like
Because
how much do you want it? Kind of like the Coast Guard. Like
yeah,
some of those guys wait years
mm-hmm.
before they're allowed. And I'm not saying that they're over here. I mean, they have more of a small community, so it makes sense. They can't just overstack their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, how much do you want it? You know what I mean? Like it kind of really comes down to like the people. I would say I can't say everyone, but I would say majority of the people probably in the Coast Guard that I've met they're there because they want to be
Yeah,
there. It wasn't a need. Like the other branches are kind of like I need to be in the military. Like I can't be here anymore for whatever reason. Where the Coast Guard's like I don't really have to be here, but I want to be
yeah,
here. Like so I think that like I've never met anyone in the Coast Guard that like didn't have a smile on their face. Like I've always you know what I mean? Like they always like they're in a lot of them, especially on the smaller boats and stuff like that they're families. You know what I mean? Like they take care of each other. They love each other. Stuff like that. But I mean, this this has been fun. This has been like a really good experience. I mean, it's nice to kind of because I personally have my own views of the military. I have my own views of what could be different, what should stay the same. Just aspects like that. But it's and I'm not saying that you're new to the Navy because by all means, like you're not. You have experiences that I don't within the Navy, such as being like on a USS vessel and things of that nature. But it's nice to sit down and talk with somebody and be like, why did you join? Like, what are your takeaways and stuff like that? And I know we've kind of really revolved around the Navy during this like interview podcast, whatever you want to call it. But like, I think that this is where in our society, especially when it comes to the military, we are hugely misinterpreted. Like the military is like so romanticized like through film and stuff like that everybody's like, oh my gosh, like the moment I join, like I'm boots on ground, I'm learning cool stuff. And then they join and they're like, why am I like standing here at 4 o'clock in the morning, but we don't actually start until 10?
yeah.
Like, and then they just become like sad and depressed. The other unfortunate part is if anybody who's watching this is ever interested in joining the military, just know it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's by all means not the hardest, by any means not the hardest, but the hardest part for people that I have found is being away from family.
Yeah.
Like, and even prior to having children, being on the ships, I've worked with several people who have kids, and so we'd pull into a port, and that's when they get to FaceTime with their kids and their wife, and their wives and stuff like that have to revolve their schedule being stateside with like being overseas, because being overseas in some places we were like 12 hours ahead of everyone, so it might be nighttime for us, but it's like just morning for them, things like that. And I used to always be like, man, you guys are probably the strongest people I've ever met in the military, because like you have the most mental fortitude, because it's hard to be away from family like that. And you know here, like right now, like again, knock on wood, I have a toilet overflow, I have a pipe burst, I have whatever happened in my home, car, unfortunately stops working or whatever. I'm here. I can handle this. My wife doesn't have to worry about it. Lynn doesn't have to worry about it. We're gonna work through it. We'll get it done. But now I'm, 2,000 miles away
Hmm.
on a ship in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, yeah, a pipe burst yesterday, and I'm sitting here like, what did you do?
Yeah.
Like what did you do to fix the situation? God forbid you weren't just like, whoa, I know we're gonna be talking tomorrow, so it's just flooding the garage right now. Like,
Hmm.
no, like turn off the water. Like, what are we talking about? But yeah, I mean, I hope you've enjoyed this experience like so far. I think one of the things that we're gonna try to do for this, not only to do more kind of like interviews in the future, and just about different things. I mean, I'm glad we talked about the Navy so much and stuff like that, and obviously your sports kind of career that you had. I call it a career because I mean it kind of was. Um, but actually, before we close out, are you looking into like anything? Like I know different sports have like beer leagues and stuff like that. Are you gonna join something like that, like recreationally?
So one of the things that like it just depends on the area. So like I know that Jacksonville has a league. I have to look more in to see like when their schedules are and stuff. But pretty much everywhere you go, there's always a beer league. I played for a Devil's Backbone beer league for like a tournament. So that was in Lynchburg, Virginia, and everything. And then in Virginia Beach, there was a Christian school that they would host games and stuff on Sundays. So I got to play with them a little bit. One of my other buddies that I grew up with was in the area, so I played with him too. Um, if I could find one out here, I would want to play. I still have all my gear and everything whenever we move, but if I could play with them, I could. But I've always tried to think about like we have people in section that play too, so like getting a little pickup game, even if it's only four people, just throwing it around, that'd be pretty fun. It just depends on if we have enough players, I guess, and then if I want to travel the distance to play with them. But yeah, I still want to keep playing lacrosse as much as I can. I got Daxton lacrosse stick when we were at the Dick's Sporting Goods when we were hanging out with his family, and Daxton's more into baseball and everything, which is fine as long as he's athletic. That's what I'm okay with. But he'll throw around with me a little bit. He's still learning how to play and catch, so keep lacrosse in the family.
All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and I think we're gonna wrap it up. I've enjoyed my time. I'm really glad you came out. I'm really glad we did this. I'm definitely gonna make sure that this gets uploaded because I really had a good time doing this. I mean, not a lot of people, like I said, not a lot of people sit down and just really talk anymore. Now it's all about, you know, what's that cringy clip that Will Smith's son does, like the political, like the political system and blah, blah, like all this stuff, whatever, like just sitting down and like bullshit, um but one thing I know, I asked Connor to come up with one prior to filming this. I don't know if he has thought of one. Do you have a quote that kind of stands out to you that you want to leave everybody with?
Kind of cliche, but it's one that you told me when we were talking about the music and everything that one night. When it comes to being a leader, you have the people that are in charge of you and then the people that you're leading. One of the things that stood out that you told me was if those leaders step on you and don't let you do what you're trying to do to lead the others, then they're taking away your ability to lead. So I thought that that was something that stands out to me because if you don't get to do your role, then you're not going to be able to grow as a leader or teach others how to grow as a leader. So I think that's one of the big ones that I enjoy.
Awesome.
And then another thing, one of the gifts that I wanted to give Hector here, we were volunteering one day, Habitat for Humanity. We're just putting some stuff out on the shelves for to be sold and everything. And he said that he likes coffee mugs, and so I thought that this would be a good parting gift for since he's getting ready to go away. Oh, the places you'll go.
This is great. This is great. And it really is fitting. Oh, the places you'll go. Yeah, that's actually one thing too that I have not shared yet. At the end of this month, Lynn, myself, and Nix, we will be relocating. I say relocating like we're in witness protection.
Yeah.
We're just going to a new duty station, but we're gonna be making the trip up to New Jersey. So we're gonna film that process as well. Just the whole trip up there. It's only like a 12-hour drive, but with you know a young child and having to stop, we're gonna have to stop at least a minimal every 2 hours,
Yeah.
things like that. Um, I think it's gonna make for an interesting experience. Plus, we don't have to rush; like we have a few days to get up there. So, make sure to keep an eye out. Probably sometime next month for our. It would be our first vlog, I
Mhm.
guess. Vlogging is kind of dead in my opinion, but we're gonna try it out. We're gonna try it out, and we're just gonna film our experience traveling across a few state lines and moving into our new home. So again, Connor, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Again, this was not a plug for the Navy, but if you're interested in joining the military, go talk to a recruiter. But also do your own research. You are your own best advocate in any point of your life. Um, but yeah, as always, again, I'm Hector the Pepper. This has been our first interview podcast, and be safe. Peace.